Hi everyone, I'm here with Imrith today to discuss his latest piece on battery energy storage systems in the balancing mechanism. I'm going to ask Imrith a few questions. He's going to show me a few of the graphs that he made for the piece. So let's get started. Imrith, why are we talking about BESS in the BM?
That's a great question. And I think this graph kind of answers why, or tells the story as to why we're looking at this. So this graph shows the daily volume traded in the BM by BESS assets, and it shows the last 6 months. And the reason we're looking at the last 6 months is because in November, we had the revisions to DC, which meant that there was a high service and volume requirements were much lower than we saw for the rest of the time the service was available, for the low service, that is. And we really have two stories here. So if we look at the left side prior to these changes, we can see that the BM was mainly used for bids. And the reason for that was for state of charge management. Everyone during this period of time, I think it's fair to say, was sitting in dynamic containment 24/7, getting that £17 per megawatt hour, providing the low service. When we had the changes in November, we had two big things, as I just mentioned. We had the volume requirement changes and the launch of the high frequency chain response part of the service, which meant that the BM is now being utilized more as a revenue opportunity by assets. And we can see there's been quite a shift from the amount of offers accepted and bids accepted. And when we look at the overall volumes of bids and offers in the last 3 months, it's about 50% both ways. So it's, very equal.
Nice. So are all BESS BMUs adopting similar strategies? And before you start to answer that, if you just like to in case anyone's listening and doesn't know what a BMU is, just like to explain what a BMU is. Are all BESS BMUs adopting similar strategies?
So I think, yeah. So in order to even participate in the BM, you need to be a BMU, as you mentioned. So that's a balancing mechanism unit. And that can be an individual site or it can be an aggregation of different sites, but you need to be a registered BMU in order to participate in the BM. I think it's fair to say overall assets aren't all trying to get accepted into the BM currently, and that's largely due to FFR's presence. We've seen a lot of assets move to FFR since the DC changes were implemented in November. And in this piece, I looked at 17 assets. 15 of them provided FFR at some point in the last 3 months. And a few of them, I think between 3 or 4, provided solely FFR for 2 months. So at the moment, I think, people aren't all trying to adopt a similar strategy of getting accepted into the BM. But really what this does highlight is that the BM can accommodate BESS. And I think, as merchant markets contribute more to the revenue stack, it's good news for owners and operators with the uncertainty in the near future around frequency response when FFR gets retired and if EFR gets retired.
Okay, yeah, so it's showing as kind of a potential thing that might come into play a bit more. So how is BESS being utilised in the BM?
So this is a really cool graph. And what we have here on the y-axis is the dispatched volume, and on the x-axis is the dispatch time. So these are balancing actions taken in the BM for all BESS assets in the last 3 months. And we can see that generally we have like this cone shape that BESS assets are being utilized for short periods of time and short volumes. On average, in the last 3 months, that's been about for 12 minutes for about 4.8 megawatt hours. But we can see, if we look on the top right side of the screen, of the graph, sorry, we have assets being utilized for over an hour.
Presumably they're greater than our systems, right? That are being utilised for that long. Is that a stupid question?
No. So the thing with dispatch time is you don't have to be providing power at your full rated power. So, even if you're a 1 hour system, there's the option to be being dispatched for longer periods of time. If you're providing, for example, only 1 megawatt, you could be dispatched for over an hour, depending on your energy capacity and the size of your site.
Okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Sorry for interrupting. Carry on.
Yeah, no, it's fine. And I guess another important thing to look at on this graph, if we look at 0 on the y-axis, so anything sitting below that is a bid, and anything sitting above that is an offer. And we can see that relatively the longer dispatched periods of time offer acceptances. But generally, as I said, we have this cone shape as we progress to those lower volumes, which is where the most amount of balancing actions for BESS are happening at the moment.
Nice. So what sorts of prices are these BESS assets getting in the BM?
So on average, it's around £324 per megawatt hour for offers and £90 per megawatt hour for bids.
But we're
If
seeing
we
these
look
are
at this graph,
relatively short periods of time and relatively small bids and offers a lot of the time.
yeah. So these are those prices are looking at the volume weighted average prices of both offer and bids across each day. And if we look at this graph, we can see a huge spike there on the 11th of November for the offer price. And that was actually because a particular asset got accepted at £9,990 per megawatt hour for providing 14.5 megawatt hour of volume, I think during settlement period 36 of that specific day, which obviously made the average price shoot up, which is quite crazy. And I think the prices generally, I guess, are a good indication of some of the revenue opportunities that's there. As you highlighted, it kind of depends on getting accepted and the period of which you want to get accepted at. And if we look at the cumulative top 8 assets of BESS assets in the BM during the last 3 months, the revenues they accumulated represented just under 10% of the total revenue across all markets, which in my opinion, although it's a small amount, is potentially more than I actually thought.
Yeah, it's not
the BM would
insignificant.
contribute to. Yeah, it's not insignificant at all, and it represents roughly £3,000 per megawatt over the last 3 months, which I think, yeah, is, as you mentioned, not insignificant. And so it's something to look at, definitely.
Nice. Well, cheers for taking us through those graphs. So, just lastly, I guess, in your opinion, what does the future hold for BESS in the BM?
So I think I think what the last 3 months have shown is that there's definitely room in the BM to accommodate BESS, which is good news, as mentioned, for asset owners. I hope to see, and I think we will see more activity, especially as I mentioned, FFR, EFR's retired. And DMDR, we know, has a very low volume requirements comparatively to the fleet size of BESS in Great Britain. And it'll be really interesting to come back to, especially to when we look at some of the dispatch times and dispatch volumes in a couple more months when we have a lot more data to see how really BESS is evolving and being utilized in the BM. So yeah, I hope to see BESS being accepted more, and I think that may be the case.
Nice. Well, thanks for taking us through all of that. Everyone should read the piece. It's brilliant. But other than that, yeah, if you've got any thoughts, let us know in the comments. Feel free to like, subscribe, share. And yeah, we'll see you later. Thanks for that, Imrith.
Yep. Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Ta-ra. Bye.